Hi, my name is Florence Paul, and this is Levelling With, the legal podcast with a difference. Over the coming weeks, I'll be bringing you some unique insights into the law, how it influences your life, how a legal perspective can enhance your business, and where legislation can help structure conversations concerning issues we face in society. In these first episodes, we'll be looking exclusively at the moments in your life where you'll need to consider engaging a legal professional and why.
You want experts and who know the field. I'm not saying the most expensive person is the best person, but it's,
you're not always saving money long term.
Yeah, because what you're saving in money, you're probably losing out in time.
Today I'll be speaking to Shibli Begum about the process of purchasing your first property. Shibli regularly works with first-time buyers, guiding them through what is often referred to as one of the most, if not the most, stressful time in a person's life. Nowadays, it's becoming increasingly difficult to know where to start when it comes to purchasing a property, especially with the option to take advantage of schemes such as Help to Buy or shared ownership. I talked to Shibli about what advice she would give a first-time buyer and how to get the most out of your relationship with your conveyancer. What are the first things to consider when buying a property?
That's a very good question, Flo. I would say the first thing is your finances. So as a first-time buyer, it depends. You might be already on track and wanting to buy a property. So you might already have an understanding of how you're going to finance the property and already have your savings in the relevant pots and spoken to the relevant people about a mortgage and stuff. But then you might be another first-time buyer who this is brand new to you. You don't know what you're doing, but you just know you want to buy a property. So my biggest recommendation would be that if you are wanting to get a mortgage, is that you get in contact with a mortgage broker, and that will be someone who would source all the relevant lenders and find the best appropriate mortgage for you, tell you what you can afford, the best product for you, and then present them to you, and then you choose which product you want to go to. And also that will kind of you'll be able to assess what your availability.
Can afford, yeah.
Yeah. So then you can also do that even before you're looking for a property, because then you know what you need to aim for if you want to buy a property.
Okay. And then I was wondering what the kind of stages of the process are. So if you were advising a first-time buyer, and they came to you, in terms of the conveyancing process, what would you say your first kind of involvement is?
For the processes, it would depend on what transaction it is. For example, a sale, if you're not a first-time buyer, which I appreciate, we're discussing first-time buyers here, but for a sale, somebody might want to instruct us quite early on. Although they might not have a buyer, there is a lot of paperwork that needs to be completed for the sale. So, for example, we would get instructed first of all. We would have our initial client engagement documents. Then we would have the protocol forms, so they're forms about the property.
Yeah.
So one of the forms is about the property. The other form is about what you're going to leave at the property. And some people are very organised and have all the information to their hand. Some people don't. So it's quite useful to give them the forms before a buyer is secured, get all that information.
And that sets out everything they need to gather. So is that things like deeds, or what kind of paperwork are they talking?
It wouldn't necessarily be deeds. It would be more like, for example, if they had extension, like works to the property, guarantees and various things. And if they're not organised, it might be like, oh, I need to rummage through that cupboard and find that certificate. I know I got something for the windows and various elements. For the deeds, that's the part we would do. So once we get all those documents completed and all the relevant certificates and forms that they've given us, we would then go to the land registry, and hopefully if the property is registered, unregistered can be another podcast, that's going to be a completely different thing. We would download all the official documents from the land registry, and each property has their own official title register and plan, which tells us about the property. Modern system. And then we would prepare a contract. And so then this is what's called a contract pack.
Yeah.
Once we gather the contract pack and we have a buyer solicitor confirmed and they confirm that they're acting for the buyer, we would then send the pack onto the buyer solicitor. They would then request searches, and searches give you information about the property that's not readily available from the information that we've got from the forms.
Sure.
Then they would raise what's called inquiries. So inquiries is a fancy conveyancing word for literally just questions about the property. Then that it all varies on the property, but it may go back and forth for a few weeks. It might be straightforward, might be protracted depending on what the documents and what the title deeds show.
How many issues they bring up.
Yeah, completely. And each buyer is completely different. What might bother one buyer won't bother another buyer. So you can't do a set. And also, depending on the property, for a freehold, it might be straightforward. But for a leasehold, it's probably going to be quite complicated, especially with the current legislation. Once those inquiries are resolved, the buyer solicitor will prepare a report, which will tell them the findings once they're happy to proceed.
And that's what they give the client to say, this is the property that you're considering buying.
Yeah, and then it's like an analysis of what they've done as their investigations, because we're probably talking conveyancing language, but hopefully the report will simplify and explain what these inquiries and why we're raising certain things and the important things that you need to factor in. And I always say to my clients, when on the purchase side, this is like your Bible. So if there's
anything you don't understand, presumably your solicitor can then put it into kind of layperson's
hopefully. I have sometimes had clients go, I still don't understand that, but there's nothing wrong in that. We do this day in, day out. This information is it's straightforward for us, but for a lay client, it might not be. So I can understand we might need to simplify it.
Okay.
So after the report, if everyone's happy, we go to exchange, and that's when you legally commit to a date of completion. And that's when the deposit changes hand.
Okay. So there's no backing out from the exchange?
You can, but there is, legally, that should be the case, but you can. But then there's legal implications if you do, because you've breached contract then.
Right.
And that's when you get into the field of interest and damages, and the 10% deposit plays a key part then.
Right.
So when you exchange, you have to give 10% of the purchase price.
Okay.
So if you're the buyer and I'm the seller, if you pull out after exchange, I could say, I'm keeping the 10%. And legally you're entitled to.
Wow. Okay.
So that's the incentive why you give that 10% deposit.
So from that date, you're tied in.
You're tied in. So that's why we're quite hot with our clients, where we make sure you understand the implications of exchange.
And you know everything about that property at that point. Yeah. Okay.
And then completion is when the remainder of the money gets sent over and you get the keys.
So why is there that gap between exchange and completion? What happens in that period?
It doesn't necessarily have to be a gap. Again, it depends on how you're funding the purchase. With lenders, they always traditionally like to have 5 days.
Right.
Because that's how many days they need, or 7 days, depending on the lender. That's how many days they need for us to send the paperwork to request the money.
Okay. And
for them to send the money. In between exchange and completion, we have to do certain searches that we can carry out.
Further to the ones you've done before exchange?
So they're post-exchange, post-complete, like pre-completion exchange, post-exchange, pre-completion searches, which we have to carry out. Yeah. So it gives us that time to do that and deal with any repercussions of those searches. Okay. However, I have done simultaneous, like you can do simultaneous, and even with a lender you can, but you just have to be very organised. So it's traditionally,
everything's got to be ready on that day.
That's correct. So like on completion, you have to know you've got it to hand. Mm-hmm. So if you do a simultaneous, you've in essence got everything ready that morning. Yeah. You do the simultaneous exchange and completion, then send the money. And if the bank fails, then you're in trouble. Yeah. So that's why you try and have a little bit of a gap just to save. And a lot of people also, it gives them chance to kind of finally book the removals. And when you have a lender, you need to put insurance in place. So it gives them a saving grace to kind of have a few days. Yeah. If they're juggling work in between, to put all their paperwork in order. Sure. And also, if they've got money in a savings account, they need to give their bank a certain amount of notice before they can move money. So that's another tip I try and give my clients as well. So I don't think we discussed about purchase is literally exactly the same as sale, but opposite way. Yeah. Because we're acting for the buyers. And following exchange, before exchange, I like to tell my clients, you might want to check with your bank how many days they need to transfer money, right? How much you can transfer online banking, because some people think, I can do X amount on the day.
Send it all, yeah.
And then it's like, actually, no, you have to go to the bank. But if you're in the middle of a working day, you might not be able to go to the bank, and you might need to have your passport with you and things and that. You hear all sorts.
Is that something that, say I was a first time buyer, is that something that I speak to the bank about, the lender about, or so kind of who's my point of contact there before exchange?
Before exchange, I would, so for example, just it doesn't matter. But like, who do you bank with currently at the moment? Barclays. So if you do online banking, it might tell you on the online banking your cap is 25k per day.
Right.
If it doesn't, then I would just maybe ring the bank and just say, how much can I transfer without having to go to the bank?
Mm-hmm.
Because I'm not interested in making clients incur fees. So if they say to me, I want to send 25k over 3 days, I'm just using that as a random figure. I don't know why I'm stuck on that 25k, but then I'm happy to do that. But if they tell me that, they just go into the bank, then I'm also happy to do that. But whatever's easiest for them. But I would just give them a certain day when I need the funds by.
Right. And that's the money goes to the solicitor and then they transfer it to the seller's solicitor.
Yeah. So on the day of completion, for example, if we're acting for the buyers, I will send the money to the seller's solicitor, who then will confirm they've got it. And once they confirm they've got it, they will call the agents and they'll release keys. So that's literally telling the estate agent you're allowed to give the keys over. Yeah. And then the seller solicitor, between them and the seller, they will agree how the sale proceeds are given to them afterwards.
Right. And that's nothing that we have to be involved in.
No. Hopefully.
Interesting. This is a bit more of a, I guess, general question because, as you said, every property is different, every situation is different. But roughly for a first-time buyer, how long do you think that process will take? How much kind of interaction would you expect to have with a first-time buyer? Sort of those kind of area.
It kind of makes my day when a client asks me that on the
How
phone.
long is it going to take?
How long does it take? Like,
how long is a piece of string?
I famously have said that to some clients. We tend to give a benchmark for freehold properties between 6 to 12 weeks. Mm-hmm. And then for leasehold properties, because there's new legislation at the moment with Building Safety Act and the old ground rent elements, 16 to 18 weeks.
So it's a lot longer for a leasehold.
A lot longer for leasehold and things.
So would you recommend to your clients use a reputable estate agent? Yeah.
Yes. So I would use a reputable estate agent who can maybe recommend a good solicitor. I know some estate agents do, earn commission from using certain law firms.
They have a partnership with a firm.
But then it's not always like that. There are some agents that can recommend a good because they work in the local area. They know who's good. Yeah. And like, for example, at Birketts, we have, it's not like we tied in with certain solicitors firms, but if we work closely with certain ones in the same area, especially in the Cambridge office. And we know when they're on the other side, it's going to be a good transaction because we know each other. We know how each other work. Yeah. We don't need to mess around with silly questions because we've done that. We've had a property 2 weeks ago, exactly the same situation, and we dealt with it in this way. So, we're used to each other.
A professional relationship that's already kind of established.
Yeah. And it's in the interest. And I have noticed certain agents picking and noticing that and going, oh, we'll put these two. And you're like, oh, nice to speak to you again, even though we spoke to you yesterday. But it's not in everyone's interest to go with the cheapest.
Especially if you're looking for a swift kind of process.
You want experts and who know the field. I'm not saying the most expensive person is the best person, but it's you're not
always saving money long term.
Yeah, because what you're saving in money, you're probably losing out in time. So it depends what you're looking for, really. If you want a quick and swift one, then probably someone who is a bit more expensive but knows what they're doing. Yeah. But if you don't really have time as an issue, then you can go with these conveyance firms.
Take that risk.
Think a lot of first-time buyers who use these cheaper firms don't really know the implications because they've not known anything else.
It's their first time.
It's their first time. So, but people who have used maybe Birketts in the past and then gone to these conveyancing factories probably realise, oh, this is why we don't go cheap on the fees. Yeah. So it sounds like a sales pitch, but keep using Birketts.
And in terms of expected contact, obviously you get some clients that require a lot more attention just because of the nature of whether it's more complicated, more personal. But in terms of how often you expect to be in contact with your clients for, say, a first time purchase of a freehold, what would you kind of suggest is normal?
I would say there's no right or wrong answer for what is normal. Each client, I would say, is probably different. Because another favourite question I ask when I give a quote, even not for first time buyers, for any client, is how do you like to be contacted? I think as a conveyancer, you have to kind of appreciate some clients want a bit more hand holding. some clients, even if they've done it several times, they might just want that reassurance and that contact weekly or daily. But I ask that question to the client. So if they say email or telephone, and then it all depends on how the transaction is going. Right. But I do like to keep my clients abreast of what is going on during the transaction, because I feel like if you don't keep them aware, even if it's just, I've got nothing to update you, that's better than them not hearing anything, because then they feel like your solicitor is in constant contact with you and that they're reassured and they know what's going on. Progress is being made, even though it's not as fast as they want it to be. Yeah, and they feel like you're in touch with them and you're communicating with them, which probably is the number one complaint when it comes to conveyancers, is like they don't know what's going on. I didn't hear from you, and it sounds mean, but just like no update, sorry. Yeah, but that's better than not hearing anything, I guess. Just that kind of contact. Yeah, sure. And what do you think causes the most delays in a transaction? Do you think there's things that the buyer can do to speed things along, or is it dependent on a lot of different things, whether it's searches or I don't know what kind of impacts that? It is a various elements. If we address that, what you first said about buyers, I wouldn't say it's more with it can be buyers, because one of the key things that we have to do when we're buying for a client is do source of funds checks. Okay. So some people might know how they're funding the purchase, and money's very intrusive, and it's not that we can see bank statements showing that you've got the money, but it's more how you've accumulated the funds. And this is where we get stuck, because we're governed by law to do these checks. People just go, oh, here's a bank statement and it shows I've got 100K in there. That's enough for your thing. And it might be just a savings account, but it gives me no information. Have you got that from your savings? Have you been gifted that? And gifted funds is another whole can of worms. Right. And it's all these various elements. So, and I feel like I'm very accusatory when I'm doing the source of funds check. It's very intrusive money. And I'm asking these just to sign off on. So is this sort of money laundering stuff to make sure that you're not using proceeds of crime to fund the house purchase? Yeah. Okay. And I think people think we're just being very difficult, but we have a lot of red tape which we have to satisfy. And if it's not obvious on the bank statements that, for example, like Flo's, yours would hopefully show Birketts' salary, and then you put it into like a savings account or something, and then that thread of the source of funds showing. But sometimes you get all sorts, and you feel it's quite difficult to get the client to understand that you need to prove this, and then this can go on for weeks and weeks, and then by the time you've lost weeks and weeks, and that's where a buyer can maybe delay a transaction. Okay. And in terms of what the buyer can actually do to put themselves in the best position, is that keep things like pay slips, and if you have received funds through a gift, say from a parent or grandparent, how would they show you the source of that funding? So with the each firm has their own like unique measures of their standards, what they have. Okay. But with the gifted funds, first thing I would do is warn the gifter that solicitors will probably get in touch with you. They're probably going to ask questions. They're probably going to want to see documents, because some people don't. And then when you get in touch, it's a surprise. I always say to my clients, can you just let your parents know? Because it is an intrusive thing. I don't want to be going into the same account. And you would contact the gifter? Yeah, and then I'll contact the gifter. And then depending on what you've funded, how your gifter is funding it, for example, if it's salary, then I'll just use bank statements. And if it's, I can see their salary. But if it's something like stocks and shares, then get the evidence of the stocks and shares, as much evidence as you can get. And I tell my clients, if you think of a needle and a piece of thread, if you can, thread a piece of thread all the way through the bits of paper and that it doesn't break the chain, then that's as much information. I'm not going to say, down to the last penny, how did you get that? Yeah. We just need enough documents, evidence. As much of a picture as possible. Completely. Sure. So, yeah. Okay. And I think it might be interesting to maybe discuss briefly some of the common pitfalls, the issues that people, especially first-time buyers, might face when they're purchasing. Obviously, we've talked about getting together all the paperwork, source of funds, but I wonder if there's anything else you think we as first-time buyers should be aware of. This is not like a pitfall, but another common thing that first-time buyers confuse is deposit for exchange and deposit for purchase. So deposit for the purchase in terms of mortgage is how much money you're putting towards the mortgage and as a down payment. And the deposit for exchange is the 10% of the purchase prices, which is the penalty amount that we've discussed.
If you pull out of the exchange.
If you pull out the exchange.
Sure.
Unfortunately, they both have the same name and most first-time buyers get confused. So it's just, I don't know whether if, they want to download a glossary of standard terms of what conveyancing things are, or just ask the question to your conveyancer, what does that mean?
Yeah.
Because sometimes a transaction could be delayed or misunderstood if they think they know what you're trying to ask for.
Yeah, I didn't know
but you're not.
that was two different things.
And I've had people go down to a rabbit hole, like, go down a different tunnel, and you're like, hang on, no, we're talking about two complete different things now. And if they just had asked me, you meaning this, that could have probably saved everyone a bit of time.
Okay. And in terms of that, so the deposit for the mortgage,
yes,
is that a percentage of the mortgage, or is that just you put that money up to the lender to say?
Yeah, that's exactly, you've got it completely correct. So that's what your broker would assist you with, and I guess that's how they measure their products and what they can offer you. Because I guess I'm not a broker, but I guess if you offer more of a deposit, you get a better deal. I presume that's how it works with lenders, and and then but with the deposit for exchange, it's legally meant to be 10%, but you can do it less.
Okay.
So for example, if a client is having 80% mortgage and sorry, that's a wrong percentage, like 90% mortgage.
Okay.
And
is that because you've already saved that 10%?
Yeah.
Okay.
And if for example most of their money is going to be covered by the mortgage, and they've only got 10%, but that 10% isn't 10% of the purchase price, you can go to the seller solicitor and say, are you willing to accept less? But legally, if that is the case, then if, for example, you pulled out, the other side are legally entitled to say, well, no, we want the full 10%.
Okay, so
you're
still bound by the 10%.
Still bound by the 10%.
But in the contract, so when you exchange contracts, is it saying the lower percentage?
Yeah, saying the lower percentage, but by the standard terms, they can ask for the full. So, for example, if we use round figures, if you can only offer 8,000 on the day of completion, but your completion is your deposit should be 10,000, you still have to pay that £2,000 somewhere or another.
Out, yeah.
But getting that in reality is a bit different, because that's when you get litigators involved if they don't have the money.
Sure. And just in terms of the kind of market, from your perspective as someone who sees residential property market all the time, have you noticed any changes maybe since the pandemic or over the last, how long have you been practicing?
Nearly 5 years.
Over 5 years. Yeah. Have you noticed any changes in trends?
Definitely. No? Definitely. I think I was given a baptism of fire, because when I first kind of started, it was very steady, normal, buy, selling. Suddenly we had lockdown. Suddenly we had stamp duty holiday. Then they extended the stamp duty holiday. And then the mortgage crisis happened. And now it's just a bit steady eggy, but people are still a bit scared about, using mortgages and going forward. So I've had a bit of a roller coaster with what the like. So I think I've had a very different perspective. Was if somebody did 5 years previously to me, so now they're 10 years qualified, they would probably say, oh, it's been steady. But the last 5 years have been very roller coaster, up and down. So I probably had the best experience, because you would never you see it all. Like during the stamped holiday, I think I was exposed to all sorts, which I probably wouldn't have been as a newly qualified, which is probably
just volume of people buying houses,
volume and type of work as well, and just the different natures of clients and all sorts, which you would be eventually exposed to that kind of thing, but it was on high volume with the stamp duty holiday, and then Rishi decided to do it again when he extended it. So it's like, thank you, not that we don't have enough work.
And in terms of the nature of clients, so whether it's, for example, with a first-time buyer, do they tend to be two people purchasing together, or is it single people? How do you kind of judge the market in that respect?
Traditionally, with first-time buyers, if they are, going down the mortgage route, I tend to find it is a couple, they've decided that they want to move in together, or they've been saving up for a while and they've become in a relationship. But then I have had also the other span where I've had, individuals on their own buying, and, there's nothing stopping, and they've been able to get a mortgage. But then I think a broker would be best advised, but I do find when people are buying on their own, they usually are getting certain gifted deposits. Right. So that's where mum and dad comes into play. So I am finding the market at the moment, you can buy on your own, but it's not, I don't usually see just a mortgage and your savings. I usually see savings, mortgage, and mum and dad getting involved, because at the moment, the market, you just can't seem to do it yourself. No. Certain lenders are doing mortgages that kind of assist. Like I know this is not shout out to Nationwide. They're doing like a help, assist, a bit like Help to Buy, but Help to Buy is no longer, but it's a mortgage fund, and they, it kind of helps the first time buyer get on the ladder and help. And then we've also, I don't think we've explored this, but like shared ownership.
Okay.
So that's another avenue that if you can't really afford to get on the property market, it's another avenue that the government assist. So you would own a percentage of your house, and then the housing association or the developer, whoever the other people are, would own the remainder percentage. But then you can increase your shares.
Right.
So you own more of the house.
So what would be the kind of normal buy-in percentage-wise of a shared ownership?
So I think the minimum is like 25%.
Okay.
And you could go up to 100%. But with shared ownership, you wouldn't start off at 100%. You would start off with a certain percentage.
Okay.
And go up.
And you would then buy the property in stages from that developer or housing association. Okay.
Yeah, and then that would be called staircasing. So if you've heard that word, it's literally you're increasing your shares and things. And with that, it incentivizes first-time buyers, because yes, you have a mortgage, but you have to pay rent with shared ownership, but it's a reduced rent.
Is that rent of the other, say, 75% of the property?
Yes, that's correct. So, but I have heard people who are buying shared ownership say to me, although they're paying a mortgage, rent and expenses is still cheaper than renting as a whole.
Okay.
And if you think about it, if you're doing that, you're still getting some interest in a property.
Sure.
And then when you can afford, you can go increase your next step.
Okay. Very interesting. And in terms of considerations, if you are buying not shared ownership, but say you're buying with a partner and you're unmarried.
Yes.
What kind of considerations do we need to take into account? Should there be trust? Yeah. I don't understand this area at all.
That is a very, very good question. And if I had like a private client colleague with me, they would probably love to answer this question. But it's definitely like we work very closely with a private client, because this is definitely an area where I think a lot of first-time buyers probably don't think about. And it's a bit awkward for a solicitor at this stage, because, they're all happy. Yeah. You're trying to do it happy, but they're not thinking of breaking up. But then I think if they ever did break up, then they would be like, thank God the solicitor raised it, because and what you should consider about it, for example, Flo, if you were buying with a partner and you were putting in more of more funds than the partner, then you definitely want what's called a declaration of trust. And that is a document which a private client solicitor can prepare, and it will tell everyone what will happen if you ever sold the property. And normally you would traditionally see that Flo would get her input back first, and then the shares will be divided equally. Okay. But then you go down to the, if you hold as joint tenants, which is if either of you pass away, then it goes to the other person directly. Right. Or you can have tenants in common, which is as per your will.
Yeah. Okay.
But those kind of areas, we work very closely with private client, and they can guide you further on those.
Is there a bit more of a trend towards that now, with, I guess, less people getting married? Or
yes, and like I'm a big advocate myself. Like, I always say to my clients, would you like to speak to our private client solicitors? Because, like you said, if it goes wrong, and especially also if mum and dad are putting money in, it gets a bit complicated, because it's not just gifted funds. We also get where parents are loaning funds and all sorts, and you get very,
whether it's a soft loan or
it's like different arrangements. And like you said, it might be a soft loan at the time of the purchase, but if it all goes wrong, they might have never liked girlfriend or boyfriend, and then it just gets very messy. No one thinks
it's going to go really wrong, but
and at least you've got the comfort of that document.
Yeah.
I think I just remembered another thing that we probably didn't discuss, that with first-time buyers, is surveys on properties.
Okay.
So I spoke heavily about getting in contact with a broker and estate agent, but a good surveyor as well is going to be something key, because I'm a keen advocate for surveys on the property. maybe not if it's not a new build, but if second-hand properties, because these are experts. They look at the property and they can guide you. If you don't get a survey, you might think, what if? And like 10 years down the line, with the wall is cracking, you might think, oh, would the survey have revealed that? There's certain things that we can, as solicitors, look at the paperwork, but with the naked eye, until you visited the property, which us solicitors don't do, there's only so much we can guide on, and we're not experts on like that area of the industry. So I always recommend to get a survey, and then, you can discuss the outcome with us.
Is that something you would arrange for a client, put them in touch with someone that you know, or is that something they need to find independently and then provide you with, say, the report or the response from the surveyor?
I would say it's a bit of both. Okay. So I do, in Cambridge, I have a few surveyors that I like to use, and they're very good enough, but with good ones, they get booked up. So, if you've had a friend who's had a very good experience with a surveyor, then I would maybe ask them, or even ask the estate agent. They work very closely.
But it's worth it long term.
Yes, because the surveyor, although it's very good to have one, they're on the cautious side. Okay. So when you read the survey, it sounds like the house is going to fall apart. So it's
the roof's going to cave in.
So it's probably in your best interest to kind of read it with someone who's probably done it before and go, okay, what do we really have to worry about?
Asbestos.
Yeah. And that's something. And also it's what, I guess, what you want from the property, and what would concern you if you were buying it going forward.
Okay.
Me again. Thanks for listening to this episode of Levelling With. Next week, I'll be chatting to Tom Quinn about prenups, if you need one, how to go about getting one if you do, and where people go wrong. Remember to rate us on your app of choice for podcasts. And if you like this episode, why not subscribe? We're available across Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and Google Play. Also, follow us on social media. We are at Birketts LLP on Instagram, LinkedIn, X, Facebook, and TikTok.